My name is Carly. I'm one of the funeral directors with Families First Funeral Home. Just wanted to thank you all for being here tonight and for making the drive, especially out in this weather. Just a gentle reminder to turn off the cell phones that you have with you, or at least put that volume onto silent, just so we don't have any interruptions through Christine's presentation. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Christine McMillan. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Carly. And thank you again to Families First, Alyssa, for supporting us during the evening. If you need me to speak up, please just do this. And I want to echo what Carly said about coming out tonight. You are faithful to come out on such a dreary, wet, damp day. So I hope you leave tonight with something valuable. We'll be here about an hour, probably. I'll be talking, if I talk straight through, it'll be about an hour and a half. If you need to take a break at any point in time, please just get up and do so. If you want to take a collective break, I'll ask every so often. The restrooms are out the second set of doors in the back, both washrooms. And if you need to take a stretch break, please feel free to do that. I certainly won't be insulted if you get up, if you have a bad back or anything. So thank you for coming. So grief in the new year, we're going to talk about that tonight. Were some of you here for Grieving Hearts Christmas presentation? I know some of you were. Okay. So you made it through the holidays, right? Yeah, you made it through the holidays. So whether your loved one died in 2023 or the previous years, a new year is going to elicit more longing for them, missing them, yearning for them. And that's very natural, because love and sadness are intertwined, they're intermingled. Death forces us to eventually reconfigure our lives. And the approaching of a new year is a time marker. It's a marker in time. And it might be something that you may want to avoid. Because facing the new year without your loved one might seem very daunting at this point in time. But it's vital that you enter into this new year with self-compassion, because of what you have gone through and what you are still facing. So let us all start tonight with taking a collective deep breath for all of us who are grieving the death of a loved one, but also for you. So big deep breath. We're just going to center ourselves, and we're not going to judge ourselves in this time we spend together. Okay? Is that fair? Okay. So normally, a new year, under normal circumstances, is a time to reflect on the past. Our triumphs, our challenges, what have we gone through? It's a time for optimism, clean slate, what's going to happen with anticipation. And it's usually a time that we make those resolutions, right? We're going to eat healthy, we're going to stop a bad habit, we're going to join a gym and attend it, right? Those are our normal, usual resolutions. But when you're grieving, you're entering into this year, it's a different kind of year for you. So as I said, you've made it through Christmas. That was a big hump. That was huge. And society builds it up, right? Starting in November, end of November, end of October. Sorry, what am I saying? End of October. As soon as we take down the orange and black. And so there's a build up for the Christmas season. And you might be surprised that a week later, your feelings are triggered again. And you may not have anticipated it. It may come as a surprise because, again, it triggers those feelings of yearning and longing. and you're still trying to enjoy the fact that you made it through your first Christmas. But a new year is then a reminder of your new reality. And the pain, which you weren't anticipating, which you were probably anticipating at Christmas, could blindside you. So I do appreciate you making this trip out here to find out what is this all about. So a new year is a time that represents a time frame that they're not alive any longer. And as you get into this time, you're starting to make memories where they're no longer going to be a part of. So a normal new year is about optimism. It's about hope. But when you're grieving, when you're acutely grieving, you suddenly realize that a new year doesn't hold the same messages and the same meaning for you. And you might find yourself sad and angry when you hear Happy New Year. What's so happy about it? Why do I need to make resolutions? Maybe you feel life is somewhat meaningless right now, without direction. I really don't care if I lose weight, or I eat healthy, or I become a nicer person, or I stop a bad habit. If, however, you're looking forward to this new year because you want last year and your experience to be behind you, you may be hopeful, and that could come with feelings of betrayal. Buddha says, in our lives, change is unavoidable, loss is unavoidable. In the adaptability and ease with which we experience change lies happiness and freedom. So, what do we mean? Let's talk about change. This is a big change. This is a big, different new year for you. So, change is inevitable. I think we know it cognitively, but when it happens to us, we can be thrown off. We can be blindsided. This is not what we planned. But change is inevitable. Think of those people that you know who have survived adversity. They've been able to go on and perhaps even thrive. They seem to come to terms and accept the inescapable reality that change is constant. Charles Darwin believed that survival of the fittest, the ones that survive, wasn't due to strength or intelligence. It was those who were able to respond in a realistic way to change. Now, remember, I didn't say without pain. I didn't say without pain. Buddha also says that pain is not optional, but suffering is. And suffering comes when we resist the pain. Suffering comes when we resist the pain. Change is difficult. I don't think I have to tell you that. As long as we believe that things will remain the same, we believe we're secure and immune to change. And that's a very unrealistic way of living our life. Not that you have to live on the edge of your seat with anticipation that things are going to be bad. But we have to be realistic that because things are stable right now, it does not mean that they will always be this way. Change is life-giving. People who have survived their challenges and adversities have learned to uncover things about themselves that they normally wouldn't have known. Not that we would have called pain through the loss of a loved one into our lives to grow. But if we don't resist the pain and we go with the naturalness of it, we can discover parts of ourselves. We can uncover parts of ourselves. Any questions about any of that? And change is faith in the process. So now we go back to the naturalness of life, the reality of life. Again, think of people that you find intriguing. They're the ones who never say no to anything. They're the ones who are open to things. They go with the rhythm of life. Not that they're denying it. They accept it. They accept the reality. Not necessarily what they had planned on, but it's something they come to terms with. So when we come to terms with painful things, we are cooperating with life. We are cooperating with the universe, even if we don't like it. And it takes a lot of strength and patience and maturity to go through these changes. So, what are we talking about that you're experiencing? Feeling sad, yearning? How does grief affect you? Well, we always think about grief affecting us emotionally, and very strong emotions that are demanding that we pay attention to it. But strange things also happen to the mind and the body and the spirit. And we don't realize these things. We don't know that it's going to affect our sleep and our appetite and whether or not we want to be with people. One of the most common things I hear is, I used to love golfing, I used to love gardening, I used to love going out with my friends and socializing. I just don't do that anymore. I don't recognize myself. Because grief is trying to get your attention. It's trying to slow you down so you absorb the reality. And yet, what does our society do? We're trying to rush you through it. Hurry up, get well, go back to work, sell the car, sell the house, get rid of their clothes. They wouldn't want you feeling this way. And because we don't talk about the normalcy of our grief responses, we tend to believe it because we don't want to feel good. And so if someone tells us to go back to work, but we're not sleeping and we can't concentrate, we still go back to work. So grief slows us down so that we can absorb it. Just because your brain knows, it doesn't mean your heart knows. Because all of this is based on attachment. And so we don't recognize ourselves when we're acutely grieving. Who the heck am I? I hear things like, I'm a task-oriented person. My floors were always clean. You know, I could juggle 3 or 4 projects at once. Now I can't get out of bed. Yeah, that's grief. That's not you being weak. That's grief taking a hold of your life so you pay attention to it. And we feel like we'll never feel normal again. And that's frightening. That's frightening to think that we're going to lose ourselves. But you have to trust the process that you won't lose yourself. The essence of who you are. This is a normal and a natural process. And if you do what we're going to talk about on the next slide, in grief work, you will get through it. I would be more concerned if I didn't see any signs and symptoms of grief. So, how do I do it? I do it through mourning. And mourning is an expression of what I'm thinking and feeling related to the loss of my loved one. I could be angry and sad. I could be resentful. I could be relieved and then feel guilty for feeling relief. Whatever it is you're feeling or thinking, they need to be honored. You need to sit with them, and you need to find a way to release them, or what we call express it outside of ourselves. Give it a voice. Talking, crying, writing, painting, using music, artwork, anything is an outward expression of how I feel inside. Because as long as you keep it inside, tucked away, it will freeze in there. And what will happen is time will pass since the day of death, but you'll still be frozen in time. So time doesn't heal, my friends. It's how you use your time. How effectively you use your time. Having said that, you can't check off all the boxes and think in your timetable everything's going to be fine. You have to allow the rhythm of this process to unfold. And as we were saying, it's never quick enough, right? We wonder when we get up in the morning, another morning. But you put that foot in front of the other and you keep going and you keep going. And you don't think too far ahead. And grief is going to come in waves, and this is the naturalness of the process. That's why there is no such thing as stages. It's kind of messy at the beginning. It's very messy. It's like you're in the middle of a storm and the waves are coming at you. And I don't want you going against the waves. I don't want you fighting it. I want you to go with the waves. Because if you fight the waves of grief, it's going to literally and figuratively push you back to where you should be. I can guarantee you, if you're uncomfortable feeling guilt, if you repress that, if you distract yourself, if you minimize it, you're giving it more energy to get your attention next time. So it takes more courage to stop and face it and deal with it. But because it comes in waves, the naturalness of it is that it will recede at that moment. And then you put your grief down and you pick up life. And then grief knocks you down again, you pick up grief, you feel it, you release it, you pick up life. And this is the kind of dance until grief has had its way with you. And your heart knows finally what your head always knew. So when you think they're walking through the door or they're going to call, that's your heart forgetting. That's not your head. Your head knows. Your heart doesn't know. So when we think we see them in the mall, when we're shopping, you do a double take. That's normal. That's okay. That's not you losing control of your mind. That's your heart remembering. I just want you to read something. I want to read something for you from Tom Zuba, Permission to Mourn. Choosing to heal. You have to set the intention to heal. Doesn't happen. In order to heal, you must mourn. You must push grief up and out. Contrary to the old way of doing grief, denying, suppressing, pretending, and stuffing your feelings and emotions down, you must find ways to feel, express, honor, and release all of the feelings and emotions that are bubbling up inside of you. You must give yourself permission to mourn. You must actively pursue your own healing. Time alone will not and does not heal. It's what you consciously decide to do with your time that matters. That determines whether or not you will heal. There is a new way to do grief. Tom Zuba lost 4 out of his 5 family members, including 2 children and his wife. And he's still walking and talking and breathing and living and writing a book. He's not extraordinary. He's just like you and me. So if we do suppress grief, it will build up. You're actually then working against grief and you're giving it more energy instead of discharging the energy. You're giving it more energy, which means it's going to take you longer. And what might happen then is instead of you coming to see me soon after a death and I give you grief counseling, I'm going to have to then give you grief therapy because you're going to display one of these things: delayed or inhibited grief, disenfranchised grief, or chronic or prolonged grief. And so my approach is going to be very different. It's therapy then. Because first we have to tackle, what have you done to avoid grief? We have to tackle that first, and then we have to tackle the missing. And it could be years and years later. So here are some danger signs, as we say. Yeah.
Just further to that, and everything you've said, it all makes sense, right? You know, we should give ourselves the time to grieve, and then, you know, we'll work through it on our own with no time to. But the world doesn't expect that of us.
No.
We've all got jobs to get to.
Yeah.
And the most irritating thing here is, so are you over it?
Right.
And meaning you're ready to get back to normal, because that's what the world expects of everybody, that you become that regular functioning person that you were before the incident happened. And so we all put on that happy face. Oh yeah, everything's good. And then, you know, you try to deal with it in private. I mean, you're not going to bring it into the workplace, or you might have select friends with colleagues that you actually be awesome to share that with, yeah. But for the majority of people, everybody just puts on that happy face armor and just, everything's good. So is that, by doing that, is that actually suppressing it and pushing it down? But because it's fake, right?
It is.
We admit that it's fake for ourselves, because we're only going to show the truth to people that we trust and we know they care about us.
Well, it's probably the degree to which we share. I definitely agree with you. Society, we're not comfortable with pain and sadness, because if I witness your pain and sadness, it means I can be vulnerable too. And so I want you to be back to normal. And you want to be back to normal too. So if I'm an acquaintance and I ask you how you're doing, I would prefer that you say, the best I can right now. You don't have to pour out your soul. You don't have to, you don't have to use them as a support group member. But you could say something like, it's much tougher than I thought. I'm doing the best I can. Thank you for asking. So in that way, you're not making yourself vulnerable, because many times they'll ask you how you're doing and they're moving on. Right? They're passing you, or they glaze over. But I'm more concerned about you and you're being authentic with your feelings. You don't have to say, this morning I got up and I felt this way, and last night I couldn't fall asleep. You say it's much tougher. I'm getting through it moment by moment, day by day. Thank you for asking. And then, of course, then you reach out to your good one-third, or you go to your therapist, or you go to your support group. So we have to fight against that. And I always use the analogy of a physical wound. We want it to go away, we want the broken bone to heal, but why should I pretend I'm fine when I'm on crutches? I mean, you walk into work on crutches and they're saying, well, can you climb the ladder? And you say, no, I can't climb the ladder right now, thank you very much. I can't do that. But I can do this, this, and this. So if you think of it in those terms, but your wound is on the inside. So I don't want you to continue to pretend so that you end up experiencing one of these conditions. Because when will you see that person again, even if you work with them? Is that important? You should be the most important person. Okay? Yes?
Christine, I think also, by virtue of the language we use, we try to get one another to hurry up. We say, are you over it? Well, if you're over something and you don't work through it, then essentially what people are saying, I think anyway, is, well, are you where I want you to be?
Yes.
Rather than, are you working through, how can I journey with you? It's just a sense, are you over it?
That-
You don't work anything out by getting
Over it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. You know, your way of describing it is perfect. It's like that debt. We want to pay down the debt, but if we had $100,000 to pay it off, we wouldn't have gotten into debt in the first place. So we have to chip away at the debt. We have to go through it. We have to feel the pain. So we should not fall into, we should be cognizant of not falling into the trap of pleasing other people because they're uncomfortable with my pain. If they're uncomfortable with your pain, then you might want to find some other people to be with. So thank you for those comments. Yeah. So when grief gets off track, when we get in the way of the normalcy and the rhythm of grief, we're liable to experience one of these three conditions. And like a debt, it never goes away. It just gets getting larger and larger and larger, and the cost is much higher. We say grief is the cost of loving. Would anyone like me to explain these three by any chance? Yes?
What does disenfranchised mean?
Great question. When a grief isn't fully acknowledged by society, miscarriages, stillbirth, same-sex death, same-sex partner death, somebody who died of, even in some cases, a drug overdose, a homicide death. We have our judgments around it, and so we minimize your loss. I've had clients come to me who have been the third party in an affair and lost their partner and come to me for grief. Because if they were to say, I miss him or her, they may not get the support they need because there's a judgment attached to that kind of loss. So it becomes disenfranchised. It goes underground. And so if you're telling me, you really shouldn't, in not so many words, you really shouldn't be grieving that death, then I'm going to believe it. Or even if, this is just a a general example. If your partner was an addict and you went through a lot with your partner, and then your best friend says, well, you must feel relief. That potentially could disenfranchise your grief. All right? Yes, Did everyone hear that? Yeah. So she was really putting her grief on a hierarchy over yours, right? Right beside mom's grief, right? Right beside mom's. So you're not. You're not. You're saying, I understand some of the feelings you're going through. The loss, the yearning. Now, there's some truth to it. It is very different. And you weren't saying my grief is exactly like yours. Because I have a partner to go home to. But I've lost somebody that I'm attached to. And that's what I'm trying to relate with you. So what that person was doing was saying, no, my grief is bigger than yours. Now, in the moment when we're emotionally charged and we're doing a really compassionate thing, it's very difficult to think of a comeback. But if you get the opportunity to, you may say, you're absolutely right. Your grief is different than mine. But I also miss my dad like you miss your husband. Maybe I should do a presentation on how to respond to people. Would you all come?
Yeah.
Yeah. Insensitive things people say. Yes, Mom?
You know what I have found to be kind of challenging is that, for example, I have a group of women, and for 15 years we play cards once a month. And so it was last week. It's the first Friday of every month. And I started to talk about some really nice stories about my husband. And they all got really uncomfortable. But those stories made me happy to talk about.
How did you know they were uncomfortable?
Well, the body language changed.
Body language?
They looked at one another and said, oh, and then, just smiled. They didn't engage.
There was going back and forth. They didn't respond to you. Verbally supportive.
And for me, I find it very comforting and healing to tell my stories about my husband.
Yeah.
And so when I'm with people that I'm close to, and I'm close to this group of women, then I'm more inclined to want to talk that way. I don't just talk that way to say somebody in passing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually felt let down.
Yes. Yes, and I was thinking that, as you said, I'm very close to them, and then to get this response must have been a shock. So that's how grief can also affect us on a social level. We can become very disappointed by people who can't be there for us. Can I ask you whether or not all of them, if not most of them, are married and have their spouses?
Yes, most of them do. There are a couple of the women there that do not. And I remember saying to the one lady privately, I said, I used to go home and say to my husband, I really feel for so-and-so. They travel alone. I give them a lot of credit. They even went to Paris with strangers just as a group tour. And I said that to her, and I said, and so I always felt for you, but now I feel like you
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it can be very tricky. Have you attended one of the sessions where I talked about the rule of thirds?
I've been to December.
The Christmas one, right. So Dr. Alan Wolfeld talks about the rule of thirds. People in your life can be loosely put into one of three groups after the death of your loved one. Those that will walk with you, right? We talked about that, right, before the presentation. Those that will not rush you. Those that will sit with you in silence, will give you a little push when you need it, will listen to you, will teach me about your experience. The second group will push and pull you through the grief process. They'll say things, like insensitive things. They'll ask if you're over it. They'll say things like, he or she wouldn't want you to feel this way. You should be over it by now. And the third group will kind of be neutral, or they'll disappear from your life. And Alan says, the people in your life, try to figure out loosely what group they belong to and really keep close to the first group. Really, really keep close to the first group. So what I would suggest with you then is, you thought they were in your first group. They may not be, but that doesn't mean you can't still engage in your card activity with them, but you know that you're not going to share much with them.
It made them uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable because they have to face their own mortality. And they're probably thinking, this isn't a support group.
Oh, I know.
But I mean, it also depends on how long you talked and how frequently. But if you were to say, oh, Jack really loved this,
Yeah.
beverage that you brought me, that's harmless.
Yes.
So we do have to be aware of how much we share and to whom. But I want you to keep talking about your loved one. Just as if they were still alive. Not as if they were still alive, but, oh, he or she really loved this. Oh, this was their favorite song. If it's appropriate. And of course, your therapist and your very closest and people in your good 1/3 and your support group, if you attend one, are the places to share. Where you should be feeling judged or shut down. Great questions. Real life grief questions. So here's some danger signs. I'm not going to read them. You could read them. I've got 2 slides. Now, this is persistent, intensifying feelings where you don't feel any type of relief. So feelings that your life is meaningless, that's not uncommon early in the process. But if you're talking 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, that's a danger sign. Any questions about any of those? Because if you're acutely grieving, you might experience some of these, and that's okay. Bitterness, rage, feel that you have no purpose, that's normal. It's very common at the beginning of the process. But if that continues for any length of time with any intensity, then you need to look at it. Mitch Albom says, we all yearn for what we have lost, but sometimes we forget what we have. Grief can swallow us up. Are you able to, with your sad, name at least 3 things that you're grateful for, that you still have in your life? even through your tears. If you can do that, then you just increased your chances of getting through this process in a healthy way. Anyone want to take a break? No? We're good? We're almost done. Yes?
What if you can't do that?
Can do what? Gratefulness?
Yeah, be like grateful.
Okay. Are you grateful you have a roof over your head?
I should be. I'm not sure.
Okay. Are you grateful you have a full belly?
No.
No? But you're here.
Right.
Right? You're here. So the people that come, I suspect you probably are grateful. I'd have to have a deeper conversation with you. Because you're actually questioning yourself. So I suspect you probably are, but you just have to work on it. I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. Oh, the people that come to me and they say, I don't have any hope. And I say, well, actually, you have a little bit of hope. It's flickering because you wouldn't have come to see me if you didn't have any hope. If you didn't come tonight, you don't have hope. Or hope is, almost extinguished. I remember, some of you may know the story, that I actually got into bereavement because I lost my first child. She was stillborn. And we lost her in September, and she was due in November, so she was going to be our Christmas baby. And I remember walking along the river with my husband. It was a beautiful fall day, and I had to force myself. I mean, I'm holding his hand, and but I had to force myself to think of all the things that because Thanksgiving was coming up, all the things that I was thankful for. But I had a lot to be thankful for, even though the pain was overwhelming and the absence was overwhelming. The loss was encompassing me. But deep down I knew I had a lot to be grateful for. So, instead of focusing on the normal New Year's resolutions, I'd like you to enter this coming year focusing on self-compassion and self-care instead of self-improvement. So, I resolved to, and the first one isn't quite a resolution, but January is just a month, okay? It's just another month. You're still going to miss them in February, and March, and April. All right? But there's such a big buildup, right, to January. So self-compassion and self-care. Practice saying no. Remember, you're on crutches. Not right now. I am not able to do that. However, I can do this and this for you. Find something to be grateful for. If you need to, at the end of every day, write down 3 things that you did or that you're grateful for. I did the laundry. I'm grateful that I ate today. I'm grateful someone called me to ask me how I am. I still feel sad, but I'm grateful for those things. Learn as much as you can about grief from reliable sources, and then I want you to face your grief head on. I want you to courageously put one foot in front of the other and keep feeling your feelings and expressing them. I want you to become comfortable with your relationship with your grief and not to judge it. Because if you expect other people not to judge your relationship with grief, it needs to start with you. When you don't remember things, when you can't focus, I don't want you to get upset with yourself. That's grief. That's grief brain, grief fog. okay? Don't give yourself negative messages, because there's enough out there. Whoops, sorry. Put a good support system in place, and then keep reviewing that support system. I don't want you to necessarily end relationships, but I will tell you relationships change after a significant loss in our lives. Some are strengthened, some are deepened, some you lose, and some you realize maybe they were only fair weather friends. It's the ones that walk with you when the road is uphill and rocky. Limit your time on social media, because guess what? Everything's perfect out there in that world. Right? Everything is perfect. And then what do you think is going to happen to that little voice in your head? It's going to become louder and louder. You're also going to resolve not to allow my fear of the future to stop me from trying something new. What if you didn't have any fear? What would you do? What would you do? What would you do if you didn't have any fear? Acknowledge you are still loved. And acknowledge that the pain in your heart is because you were loved by that person. And be okay when you feel moments of joy. Remember when I said you feel your grief, you release it, you put it down, you pick up life? Maybe in that moment, you feel something authentic. You smile. You laugh. You have your first belly laugh. Be okay with that. Keep talking about your loved one. Use their names. That's especially important for parents. They want people to use their child's name. And if needed, seek professional help. I'll have clients come to me and say, I don't know if I need it or not. You let me know. And many times I'll say, you look like you understand it. You've got a good support system. You're willing to take on the work. You know where to reach me. We are resilient. We are truly resilient. If we have the capacity to love, nature has also given us the capacity to get through our loss. And remember, as we've talked about tonight, others may not understand your pain. And you can't expect them to totally. It's that rare person who says, tell me, teach me, help me to understand what you need. Many times, as you were saying, they just want to fix you. Grief, I said it slows you down. So you have to get rest. Remember, our bodies know how to self-regulate. When you're tired, you rest. When you're hungry, you eat. When you're hot, you perspire. We have this ability to self-regulate. But grief can also be restless energy, so I want you to move your body in some way. Grief is also a journey of the spirit or the soul. So whatever way you're comfortable with, sometimes you need to retreat and you need to be alone, to reflect, to pray, to meditate, to do your deep breathing, to center yourself. I resolve to recognize and maybe even celebrate my strengths. I'm still here today. I came out today. I made it. This is a strength. This is a victory. Smile. Find something to smile about. And when the waves overcome you, breathe and take it a moment at a time if you need to. And when you do smile, and when you do experience moments of joy, let go of the guilt. Don't hold on to that guilt if you experience it. I'm not presuming you will. Because it could feel really good and nice. Don't sit with that guilt. You do not have to be connected to your loved one for the rest of your life out of pain. Don't get attached to your pain if you think that's the only way that you're not going to forget them. It isn't. When we step outside of our comfort zone, when we step outside of our pain, that helps us too. So maybe in your journey, maybe you can be of service to someone else in a small way. And as I said, keep a gratitude journal. Yes?
What you're talking about is a couple of principles that are so deeply practiced in recovery. Well, there's about 3 of them, but certainly living a day, an hour, or a moment at a time. The gratitude journal, definitely. We also have a saying, and it applies to the 12th step. To keep it, you have to give it away.
Give it away. Be of service. Yeah. Get outside of yourself. And I do believe that the 12-step program, whether you believe in it or follow it, is steps for living. Principles for living. Make amends when you've hurt somebody. Be reflective. Live a day at a time. Surrender to the rhythms of life. Accept what you cannot change.
And surrender. Not
Surrender.
meaning giving up, but rather giving over.
Giving, yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
I have found in the last few months that a lot of people that phone me and, talk, who have had, stories of loss for themselves, and they share those stories. Now, these are people I've known for a long time, but I never knew their story. They're just somebody that is more of an acquaintance, and by them calling me and sharing their story, I actually draw inspiration from them. And I never knew some of these things about many people that have called me in the last few months and shared their story. And it's really nice to connect in that way.
And I can almost bet you're going to be one of those people. You're going to turn around and help someone else when you're farther along in your journey. Because you're telling me you're grateful for what they're doing. And so it is in the sharing, not only of our joys, but also our sorrows, that we make connections. And sometimes the connections are deeper when we share our sorrows. Not to outdo the next person, but to say, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to walk with you. So when I talked about not releasing most of your pain, not falling into the trap of thinking if I give up my pain or if I feel less pain, I'm going to forget my loved one. Organically, if you do your grief work, you will come to create what we call a continuing bond with your loved one, where you take the essence of who they are and weave it into your life as you go forward. So it's not the focus as it is in the beginning, but it's part of your life going forward. So whether you start a scholarship fund in memory of your loved one. I had a client whose husband was a well-known electrician, and so she donated a lot of his tools to St. Clair College, and she and her 2 adult daughters started a scholarship for female students in the program. electrician program. His name is always going to be used then, every time that scholarship is given out. That's a continuing bond. Making their favorite dish on their birthday or going to their favorite restaurant is a form of continuing bond. Anything that is meaningful for you, whether or not, you can't, well, physically, logistically, you can't forget. So if you do the grief work and you go with the naturalness of the grief process, which at the beginning is very daunting, you can come out with your pain softened and have developed a continuing bond that you carry with you as you move through and forward. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers is a continuing bond. There's a strip between, I think, Tilbury and Chatham on the 401 where there's cement barriers. That's a continuing bond that I know one bereaved mom, because she was my client, and somebody else from Chatham who lost a loved one on that strip because an oncoming vehicle crossed the median and hit their loved ones. That's a continuing bond. We're going to turn pain into purpose. But you have to work with your pain before you turn it into purpose, which gives it meaning. This is my continuing bond with my baby. I wasn't doing this work before I lost her. It came naturally out of my mourning. And you need to be willing to see life beyond your pain. Marianne Williamson says, in every heart there is an inner room where we can hold our deepest pain and our greatest treasures. So that heart that's breaking is the heart that held your love. Same heart. So as we close, I want you to contemplate these things. I want you to ponder these things, not just for tonight, but for the coming year. Who's inspired you? Who helped you along in your journey thus far? Maybe your caregiving journey if your loved one was ill. Maybe your grief journey. What have I learned thus far about myself? What strengths have I realized that I didn't know I had? Maybe they weren't apparent before. Maybe you're uncovering it. What was important to me before my loved one's death compared to now? Have your priorities shifted? And grief has that potential to shift our perspective, our priorities. We choose our friends differently, right? We don't necessarily want superficial friendships. We want deeper friendships, more meaningful. How has their death impacted my values and the choices I've made? And the next one is something that is an ongoing process. What is the meaning to be found in my experience? Please don't let anyone else dictate that. There's always a silver lining. God couldn't give you anything more than you can handle. There's a reason for this. You have to give it meaning and purpose. And lastly, do I want to become bitter or better? So I am going to end with a quote from Nelson Mandela. May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. So I want you to enter into this new year with a new perspective, a different set of resolutions that are more applicable to your experience. You get to write the script. You don't have to follow anyone else's. So thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I wish you a safe journey to wherever you're going after this. All the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you for your participation. It definitely makes it more meaningful, not only for me, but for everyone up here. Thank you so much. Good night.